Good evening, everyone. It is that time of year, our organizational meeting for the City of Lacombe Council on Monday, October the 28th. It's now 5:30 p.m. and I'll call the meeting to order. You've got an agenda before you. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Let's move right into our request for decision then. First up, yeah, that would be a great idea. Thank you, Councillor Hoekstra. I'm in such a hurry to get things underway. I forgot to vote on the one. I don't think we're changing any agendas, but let's go ahead and do that. And that is on your machines. Please vote now. Thank you. Unanimously in favor. Item 3.1 under request for decision, the meeting dates for the 2025 council meetings. Coordinator Bellobono.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and Council. This evening we are presenting the 2024-2025 council meeting dates for approval. The regular council meetings held on the second and fourth Monday of the month at 5:30 p.m. No public notice required as per the MGA 193.2 and procedural bylaw section 6.51. Committee of the whole meetings usually on the first Monday of the month, scheduled based on business needed. Recommendations for the November 2024 to October 2025 schedule is the regular council meetings continue with the existing schedule, except suggest canceling meetings on December 23rd for a winter break and on July 28th for a summer break. The committee of the whole meetings suggested dates are December 16th, allows for administration to present background information and finding on potential application of subclassing for residential properties for council to determine further direction. And October 6th, 2025 for internal and external organization budget presentations. Recommendation from administration this evening is that council approve the regular and committee council meeting dates from November 2024 to October 2025 as presented. Incorporating these changes aligns with our bylaws and allows for a more efficient schedule. I'm open to any feedback.
Certainly, if anyone has any reasons why any of these need to be changed, we would certainly entertain those. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would just make the motion that council approve the regular and committee council meeting dates from November 2024 to October 2025 as presented.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Please proceed to vote. In your machines now. And that is unanimous. The meeting schedule is now set. Item 3.2 is the deputy mayor roster. Coordinator Bellobono.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and Council. I'm presenting the roster of deputy mayors for Council's approval for this period spanning from November 2024 to October 2025. City of Lacombe, in accordance with its procedural bylaw and Municipal Government Act, mandates the appointment of one or more councillors as deputy mayor to ensure that the office of the deputy mayor is consistently filled. The deputy mayor plays a critical role in our council structure. They serve as a chair in the absence of the mayor and assume all associated duties and responsibilities during that time. Attached, you will find the proposed roster for deputy mayors for 2024 to 2025. The roster is based on a 2-month rotation, which will be activated if the mayor is unavailable. from November 2024 to October 2025. Should the mayor be unavailable to attend an event, the deputy mayor will be requested to step in. Should neither be available, the option will be sent out to the rest of council members to volunteer.
Anyone? Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I move that council approves the proposed deputy mayor roster from November 2024 to October 25 as presented.
Thank you. Any additional input? Seeing none, you can please proceed to vote. And that is unanimously approved as well. Next item, 3.3, is the council appointments to commissions, boards, and committees. Coordinator Balabono.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and council. Administration is seeking council's approval for the 2024-2025 councillor appointments, reappointments to the council commissions, boards, and committees. In accordance with council's procedural bylaw section 6.79, committee members are to be appointed by council at the annual organizational meeting. Attached are the proposed appointments and reappointments. I'd like to draw attention to the addition of a second council member to the Lacombe Police Commission as bylaw 511, section 3.2 of the Municipal Police Commission bylaw now specifies 2 council members may be appointed. The mayor has informed the chair and commission members about this implementation process in a letter. Additionally, commission boards and committees with designated alternates are included on the list. Primary members are responsible for notifying the administration liaison if they cannot attend, so arrangements can be made for the alternate to participate. The next known meeting dates for the commission, boards, and committees are provided for reference.
Thank you. Do you have any input on this item? Councillor Konik.
I also move that council approve the 2024-2025 council appointments and reappointments to council committees, boards, and committees, commissions, boards, and committees as presented.
Thank you. If there's no additional input, you can proceed to vote, please. And that is unanimously in favor. I guess just a side comment there. I had very little input from anybody, so I'm going to go with silence is golden. You're pleased with your appointments now, and things are going rather well. So no, didn't see any reason to upset the apple cart and do a bunch of changes for the last year of the term. That brings us now to everybody's most favorite, all important item, council seating arrangements. Coordinator Balabono.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and council. The council seating arrangements is proposed for to commence November 14th, 2024 for the 2024-2025 seating arrangements as shown in the RFD and the council chambers camera view as well.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd like to move that council acknowledge the 2024-2025 seating arrangements as information. And I'd like to make a comment. I'm glad you didn't mention the reason why I was moved. Appreciate that.
I think that in fact, the reason was mentioned, there wasn't one, so there's nothing. Thank you for that, though. Not seeing any other input, please proceed to vote. And that is unanimously in favor as well. The next item up, 3.5, are a review of code of conduct, and I think that's resulted in some additional paperwork for our coordinator. CEO Gowdy.
So you may recall that on September 9th, an appendix was added to the code of conduct that was originally adopted in 2018. The appendix is a annual sign-off that is a statement committing to the code of conduct from council. I want to just publicly reiterate, this is not because we've had a bunch of code of conduct complaints or issues that are, this is required from past bad behavior, but rather a desire from all of council to continue a harmonious working relationship that does involve constructive disagreement, but also mutual respect for one another. We see even from a recent special resolution from Alberta municipalities to advocate to the province for the establishment of an independent office of integrity for local governments. And many of our comparator municipalities that have looked to formalize some of their integrity commissioner type behaviors, that this is an ongoing issue across the province and actually across the country. And so we will be asking or circulating, as per council's direction, a commitment sheet after the meeting. One thing that you may want to consider in the future when you are updating and reviewing the code of conduct bylaw is just making sure that we're very explicit about what information may or may not be released following an investigation. If there is a complaint, that's something I hear from some of my colleagues who do experience more frequent code of conduct issues, have highlighted to me as something that can become an issue if it's not clearly outlined. So when we next bring opportunity to review this, we will probably make that suggestion as well.
Thank you for that. I think when the public is looking at any of these documents and whatnot, if they turn to the end of the section here and look at the Schedule A, will be of most interest to them, and outlines 10 items there, which each of us sign off and agree to. It is, of course, if we have a motion accordingly. Councillor Dallas.
Yeah, my apologies. I was going to, but I see there is no recommended motion on this, so
There is no recommended one, but you're certainly free to make one if you choose.
I'll pass.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Good. Okay. Very good. Item 3.6, the council procedural bylaw 370. And we've got a quick reference guide for distribution and an updated council report there that Coordinator Bellabono will go through for us now, please.
Thank you, Mayor Christie and Council. Following the approval of procedural bylaw 370.4 at the April 8th, 2024 council meeting, administration has created a quick reference guideline to assist council members in implementing the consolidated bylaw 370. A laminated copy as such of the guide will be distributed at the first regular council meeting in November 2024, and an electronic copy will be available on the council hub. In the folder, the front cover has key points to know, which are framework for introducing, debating, and voting on motions to promote clarity and fair participation. A 3-page spread on the inside is the key motions list, an overview of commonly used motions such as adjournment, amendments, and requests for information. On the back side is the secondary motion chart, a guidance on when secondary motions are in order, including debate, eligibility, and conditions. On the very back is the chair role and responsibilities, which outlines some of the chair's role in facilitating discussion, enforcing decorum, and leading meetings without directing decisions. In addition to the quick reference guide, administration is providing an updated council report template to enhance organization and clarity in our reports. The council template has been updated to align with other report formats, enhancing organization and consistency for meetings and events. Distribution will occur after the October 28th regular meeting. The template will also be available on the council hub. These resources aim to streamline council's procedures and support effective governance. Administration is not seeking any motion for this evening, but are open to any questions and discussion.
Thank you. I know all of you have not had an opportunity to look yet at this here, but I think it goes an awful long way in perhaps simplifying some of the procedural items that we do have in place. I don't think there's anything that's earth-shatteringly new or different in there. It's just that it does put it in an easy format that everybody can look at and provides a foundation for positive and productive meetings, which is something that will be useful for all councils from here on forward, which is a great thing. So thank you for getting that put together. Councillor Konik.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I quite like that. I've been here the longest and sometimes I still don't know when's a good time to do this or do that. So I think this is actually quite helpful. And I think future councils, that should be one of the first handouts you get as a new councillor, is that little handy duty thing. So thank you.
Very good. I think that concludes our business for the organizational part of the meeting this evening. It is 5:48. Councillor Gullickson.
I believe we need to have a motion to adjourn.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Please vote now. Thank you. We are recording once again. It's time for our regular meeting for October the 28th. Lacombe City Council is now 5:52. And I'll call the meeting to order. Of course, it's outside of our normal 5:30 time because we had our organizational meeting prior. So like I said, it's 5:52. Get things underway here. And the consent agenda, first off, everyone. Is there any items that you'd like to see removed? If not, we can please go ahead and, Councillor Dallas.
Motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. No one has anything to be removed this time. Therefore, we can proceed to vote. Thank you. And that is unanimously in favor. Move on to the regular agenda. I understand there are perhaps some additions to be considered. First off, CEO Gowdy, you have an item?
Yes, you and I had discussed adding an in-camera legal item, which I propose.
Very good. I don't think we need the FOIP number for that now, do we?
No, we can add that in the minutes afterwards.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I would like to add a notice of motion.
Very good. So noted. Anyone else? Very good. Councillor Conick.
I would so move that we adopt the agenda as amended.
Thank you. Last opportunity. We're all good. Please proceed to vote. And that is unanimously in favor as well, so we can get underway. We do have a couple of presentations this evening. Thank you all for attending. We appreciate it. Item 4.1. I understand that we have with us a managing partner of RC Strategies, Mr. Mike Roma, with us here to speak on the recreation and culture refresh. And I would have you please use the microphone there when the red light is on, as it is now. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of council, members of administration, thanks for having me here tonight. And thanks for giving me an excuse to come and visit your wonderful city again. I'm from just up the road, so it was an easy drive. And unfortunately, I was listening to the Oiler game on the way here, so I don't mind a break from that right now too. Really excited to be here in front of you tonight for a variety of reasons. We do this kind of work in communities all over the place, and it's important and enjoyable work everywhere that we do it. But this is a pretty unique kind of instance for me because I was the project manager in 2013 when the plan that this is updating or refreshing was actually completed. So it gave me a chance to look back over 10 years because that project even started before 2013. And you'll see that as I go through this presentation, there are statements in there like as it was back then, changes in, resident preferences or trends that occurred back then that have maybe changed, things that have emerged since. I'm not just saying that because it makes sense to say it. I'm saying it because I'm actually going down memory lane. I was here and yeah, I'm excited to be able to present this to you tonight. So the agenda for tonight's presentation. You can see briefly revisit the project purpose and then go through a bunch of research and engagement results. So kind of what took us most of our time and labor. And then I'll talk to you about how that implicates the 2013 plan and any new strategies or suggestions that we have to kind of enhance that plan moving forward. And then we'll have a chance for questions and discussion. So this is an update to the 2013 Recreation and Culture Master Plan, which I already said I was involved in. And why do we need an update? Well, things have changed since 2013, obviously. Recreation and culture preferences always change in society. There's been some major things that have happened since 2013 that impact not only recreation and culture, impact the city, the province, the nation, and the world. Lots of interesting stuff. So you can see there's a few different reasons outlined on the screen, but I don't think anyone would disagree that we're in a different place now than we were in 2013. How we go about developing a plan is always about learning about the current situation for, in this case, recreation and culture in the community. And really what we did is revisit all of these things that we originally did back in 2012. So we looked at community context, we looked at the investment that you've made in these services and in infrastructure since 2013, updated some other things like utilization, looked at your new policy and so on, and we engaged the community. And that's probably, every time I put one of these summary statements on the screen, I just think that that's probably what's going to be most interesting to council, but I might be wrong there. We'll see. So I'm going to get right into it now. And we always start a recreation and culture planning process and presentation of a plan with a reiteration of the benefits of having these kinds of services in your community. There's no legislation that suggests what you should or shouldn't have or need to have as it relates to recreation and culture services. So it's community choice. And the outputs, the benefits that you get are hard to measure, but they're vast. So this screen here just outlines what some of those benefits are. This is, I'd say, updated literature compared to what was in 2013, but we had a similar type of presentation material back then. One thing we didn't have back then, and I know because I was had the opportunity to be involved in this initiative, but it's actually a Canada-wide initiative that was released in 2024. And it's an attempt to start to quantify what those benefits of recreation and culture services are. So you can see there's a lot of numbers on this slide in the billions. That obviously isn't the impact that your city gets to feel from having recreation and culture. But I will give you I guess a warning, not a warning, but a heads up that the methodology that was used to calculate this at a national level is actually going to be available at a community level within the next couple of months. Every time I give a specific date, I'm wrong on that, but it's going to be a web interface that administration will be able to use to tell you that story if you want to hear it. So in terms of the community context, you have grown as a community, and that growth is expected to continue. And not only have you grown, but the complexion of your population has changed. So you can see more older adults, but also increases in ages 10 to 19 and 30 to 39. One of the things that's a little bit more sophisticated about our planning approach right now is we have started to get into something called geodemographics. So that's looking at geospatial and demographics at the same time together. So the next few slides will kind of take you down that road a bit with us, but in essence, it's just looking at how your population has changed geographically and where that growth occurs. One of the things that we've started to do, and I have a feeling this might relate to the presentation you'll get after my presentation, is we start to look at how different types of services are reaching populations, again, from a geodemographic perspective. So we've started to use something called the multiple deprivation index. I'm not sure if council's aware of that or not, but it's a StatsCan index that's based on those 4 areas or characteristics of the population. So residential instability, ethnocultural composition, economic dependency, and situational vulnerability. And those things combined create geodemographic layers and allow us to do an analysis, as you can see, that starts to highlight areas of the population that we say could benefit most from access to recreation and culture. Everybody in the community can benefit from these services, but there are facets of the population that can benefit more. We looked at your contemporary slate of planning and policies. So there's been some updated or new plans and structure that has been added to the city's planning fabric since we worked here last. And we have some summary statements there. It's clear that these services are still important to council and the city, and that intermunicipal planning is important, which it actually was back then, even though that was pre-ICF or required collaboration to occur. It was still very much part of the city then. The importance of recreation and culture in the current MDP is highlighted. And there's also tones of sustainability and energy efficiency in the work that we reviewed. Ooh, there we go. That'll take you for a ride. Sorry about that. This one. Okay. We had the pleasure of outlining all of the investments the city's made in this first slide is recreation since 2013. And I know that many of these were single decisions for council and maybe predated some of you, but it's a pretty extensive list that's happened, and that's just in the past decade. So you've made improvements in terms of the infrastructure that you have in the community, both indoor and outdoor recreation infrastructure. And you've done the same with culture. The list isn't as lengthy, but arguably just as important and impactful. So we should celebrate that. This map, another geospatial map, shows the portion of your population that can access a variety of recreation and culture opportunities. So the darker the shade of green there, the more opportunities that residents live in those areas have access to for recreation and culture. So you can see that there's obviously a bit of a density of opportunities that are provided in certain areas, and something for you to consider moving forward if you do have the ability to invest more in these important pieces of infrastructure. We looked at utilization. So we know that the pool still has high levels of utilization, and we have a benchmark of between 6 and 7 swims per capita that we use. There's a bit of science to that. I'd say it's mostly based on our experience working in communities across Canada for a number of years, even predating my own experience. There's people at our company that have been doing it longer than I have. So that means you're approaching capacity with your leisure aquatics. There's a significant increase in swim lesson visits over the past 10 years. Your arena utilization is almost at capacity when it comes to prime time, the hours that everybody wants. And your ball diamond utilization and your soccer field utilization have increased year over year. This one's kind of an interesting one. So when we look at investment and trying to compare what municipalities invest to maybe their peers or other communities that they compare to, there's only really one good source of information for that, or apples to apples information, and that's through Alberta Municipal Affairs. So we looked at that and we compared the city to 2 groups of municipalities. One, the same ones that we used back in 2013, and then 2, the ones that you, I think, are more familiar with or compare with more frequently now. So the first thing that we found was that on average, you spend over $2 million more on recreation and culture. So that's the average over the past 5 years than you did back in 2013. Inflation has occurred. You've got more services that you're providing. And this isn't a unique statement. I'd say when we looked at, I'm not sure if council had a chance to look at some of the detailed tables in the report, but you can see that many of the other communities we looked at had similar increases. The other thing that we found though, so you spend more than you did back then, but we found it regardless of which group of municipalities that we compared you to, that you do spend less on average on recreation and culture services, which is interesting because the last couple of slides I showed you indicated improvements to service. And I wouldn't say that's indicative of the level of service that you're providing, but that's how the numbers shook out when we looked at how the city compares. There's some trends in leading practices right now that I could probably talk to for a long time. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. One major occurrence that happened in the recreation and culture world since 2013 was the introduction or the development of the Framework for Recreation in Canada, which is kind of like a master plan for Canada. It gives direction to municipalities, but everybody else that's involved in recreation and culture. So that's an important one to know about and to refer to, and your staff do refer to that already. It just wasn't around when we did the last plan. Inclusion and equity and environmental sustainability are two things that are very top of mind. And again, I think are apparent probably in lots of what happens in the city right now, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention them again. And then aging infrastructure is an issue. It was an issue back then and will continue to be. There are some participation things happening right now with different types of activities, so you can see them there, but that is really hard to keep up with and probably would change if I was here in 6 months time. I probably have different stories to tell you about activity participation. Next few slides are about engagement. So, and I'm actually going to start going a little bit quicker through these because I want to respect council's time and I feel like I'm talking a little too slow right now. So first off, our tactics that we used, there was a coded and a non-coded version of a household survey that was facilitated, and we had 816 responses in total. There was a group survey and 333 responses to that, and a youth survey and a group survey with 35 responses. So in terms of what we heard from the household survey, paved trails are still heavily utilized as they were back in 2013, and more residents are using parks and open spaces now, which I think many would attribute to some of the impacts of COVID on our society. The Memorial Center Hall and the library and the aquatic center are still the most frequently used facilities, so in that order even. And more residents today report that nothing limits their ability to participate in cultural activities and recreational activities than was reported back then. A few less residents are either very or somewhat satisfied with recreation services. So you can see 10% of our survey respondents, and the same actually can be said for cultural services. So just a little bit less satisfaction, but it's still fairly high at over 2/3 or around 2/3. We asked about improvements to programs, and the top answer then and the top answer now is still marketing of programs. So just making sure the community knows about them. And I'd say that there's more residents that feel there's a need for new or upgraded infrastructure now than was the case back then. But again, it was high then and it's high now. The demand for these kind of services tend to be insatiable in the communities that we work in, as council would obviously or probably know. You can never have enough. It's just a question of what you can afford to provide. In terms of indoor spaces, there's some things have changed in terms of priority for new or upgraded from the general public. One thing that has subsided is the demand for performing arts infrastructure, because that's something that you've addressed since then. Outdoor spaces, the project that you have right now at the lake is a top priority now, but it wasn't even identified back then. We had it in our list this time, but it wasn't even that project. I guess that iteration of the project didn't exist then. And there's some other things that have increased in priority compared to then. For instance, pickleball wasn't even on the survey back then, and it is now. Less residents are opposed to tax increases. Marginally less, so 29% now are opposed compared to 37% back then. I thought that was the best way to explain what the change in responses were there, but I'm sure if that's of interest to council, you can see there's you could make your own summary statements about some of those findings about willingness to pay. In terms of the youth survey, there's a little less demand for new infrastructure from youth, and the priorities of youth are still similar than they were back in 2013, both indoor and outdoor. One thing that was interesting is less youth find fees as a barrier now compared to back then. Almost half as many said that fees were a barrier. So that's either good or they're maybe participating in activities that don't require fees as much as they were back. I guess it's good either way, but that could be one thing that explains it. And then the group survey, a little bit of change in terms of priority of different types of spaces. You can see indoor fields and pickleball courts are up in priority. Ice is still a priority of groups. And then for outdoor, you can see some of those other changes that have happened. More groups now are opposed to user fee increases than was the case before. And that question is always framed in a way that if you had better service, if you had better access to opportunity, would you pay more? But there's still more opposed to that than there were back then, and quite a bit more, you can see. So that summarizes the recreation recreation culture research and engagement that was conducted. I have a copy of the report, and I think it's 112 pages. So I probably didn't do it all justice, but I wanted to be able to talk to you about the master plan and what we think should happen with that too. So there's some philosophical statements in the 2013 plan, like a vision and some other things to support that vision. It still sounds great. There's no reason to actually revisit it. They're very blue sky statements, but this does position or helps articulate the city why these investments are important and what they actually help the city achieve. We did look specifically at what were called strategies back then, kind of like recommendation areas. And this table highlights the strategy. It highlights whether it's still relevant or not, whether progress has been made by administration, council, and community along the way, and whether or not the continued implementation of that strategy is warranted. And I would say, you can see there's some no's on these slides as I scroll through them, but it's almost all yeses. So although progress has been made on some of these, it's recommended that they continue to be priorities for the city, with the exception of a few. There are 5 new strategies that we're recommending based on, kind of that research and engagement result, as well as our discussions with administration. First is around programming focus areas, and that's just because programs and what kinds of activities people want to participate in change over time. And we've given administration survey results and research that can help focus contemporary efforts related to programming. Improved marketing and promotions, again, something that we heard as a bit of a barrier for people to participate. Data and analytics is something that's hitting the recreation and culture world fairly strongly right now. That geospatial and geodemographic analysis that I showed council is an example of that, but there's more to it than that. Predictive modeling, AI, trying to find out ways to increase participation and ultimately increase the impact of having recreation and culture through data and analytics. So that's an important thing to note right now. A lot of communities are revisiting their fee setting and space allocation approaches. So that's something else that we've highlighted as maybe an area that the city might want to undertake over the next little while. And then also asset management practices are even more critical now than they were in 2013. And I've been told about the city's work on asset management, and every municipality is working on asset management these days, but it's something that we need to reiterate from a recreation and culture perspective. Last thing that I'm going to tell you about is the amenity assessment and prioritization that we conducted. So we had a number of different criteria that we looked at all of the amenities that the city currently invests in, recreation and culture amenities, and those amenities are like program areas or activity areas. First, we assessed the service level through a supply and demand analysis based on those criteria, which rendered a conclusion of either enhance, protect, or limit for all of the amenities that we looked at. So enhance means if you have the ability to invest now to enhance the service level, these certain amenities would warrant exploration, not recommending that they happen or not, but would be worthy of looking at that further. Protect is to maintain the service level, and limit innovate actually means if there were resource limitations, like if you had to reinvest or if you had to cut spending, that the amenities that fall into that category could be where you look to cut investment. Then we had to look at not only assessing those service levels, but we thought we'd also try to give some priority to those amenities. So in essence, what the prioritization does is it looks at all those amenities that you invest in or that you could invest in and positions them in a way that suggests certain ones would help you achieve your goals more than other ones. It's kind of an interesting way to look at recreation and culture amenities. And when you're a professional consultant in this world, you have to find interesting ways to look at that, because you're in essence having to tell a lawn bowler that they're less or more important, that their activity is less or more important than a tennis player. I have to use certain examples, ones that aren't top of mind for the municipalities that I'm working with. So it's tough work, and there's a transparent way that we've done that. But the punchline is we've got a list of high priority amenities, medium priority amenities, and lower priority amenities. And I'll just, before I put the list up, I'll just state again to council and to admin that all of these amenities deliver value in your community. They're all good. It's just that some of them are better at delivering that value than others. And that doesn't deflate the passion that's behind all of the different activities that you could be investing in. So for these high priority amenities, if you were able to look at increasing service levels, we'd suggest that these could warrant study, further study about what that would mean, cost benefit analysis, that kind of thing. Obviously, we'd also suggest that these should be reinvested in and kind of protected as you move forward. The medium priority amenities, same thing, that they should be protected moving forward, but realizing that the ones that are on the high list, you're not going to even be able to study all of those. It's not realistic. These ones, we wouldn't suggest that you'd study any enhancements right now too. And then the lower priority amenities, same thing, only sometimes if resourcing limitations exist, municipalities can't invest in everything that residents and groups want you to invest in. So the ones on this list, we think based on that analysis, are ones that you might consider not investing in if investment requirements were in front of you. That's the hardest slide for me to provide, because again, these are all important to community, but this is meant to help aid in the decision-making process. The other thing I would say is when we come up with these lists for municipalities, just as we do, it was a different methodology back then, but there was a list in the previous plan. It's definitely not a 1,000 batting average where municipalities do exactly what these lists suggest. They don't necessarily pick off the top 3 or anything like that. Again, this is just meant to aid in decision-making moving forward. So thank you for your time, Your Worship, members of council, and I'd address any questions that you have.
Thank you for presenting your findings. We appreciate it. There'll be a few questions for sure. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So a couple of questions. That multiple deprivation chart, does that really apply to a municipality our size? So, maybe the east side needs something, but if we build something on the west side, they still benefit. Like, I guess I'm just wondering if that's a formula that's more useful for a larger community, or do you see that it's still useful for one our size?
Through the chair, that's a really good question. And I would say even for larger communities, it's interesting information. It's good to know and it's at our fingertips. So why not tell that story? But it's not easy to react to. It's not easy to pick up a park and put it somewhere else or a facility.
Right.
So sometimes it might not be an infrastructure solution, or it might not just be about infrastructure provision. I think just in general, it's good to know that your population isn't uniform throughout the community. So part of the reason why that's in there is because that information wasn't available to us back then. I'm assuming that council's seen different types of that, maybe even the multiple deprivation index again. But that coupled with the fact that inclusion and access are important considerations in the recreation and culture community right now is why we've included it there. I would say like it probably is less relevant here, especially that other map that showed the access. Much of the community was in dark green or light green. It's not like people don't have access to opportunity.
Right.
But that's kind of why it was included there. And a little bit more on that. So we used to try to define either equity deserving or equity owed populations just by picking and choosing different demographic layers.
Mhm.
And we did that internally and found that we're probably not equipped to do that. And it was hard to kind of defend that. So we did find the StatsCan source of that information. And that's why we've kind of channeled all of our assessment to that. But again, maybe based on the work you'll see after this or based on other work you've done, you might have a better source of telling that story than what's been presented.
Could I follow up?
Certainly.
Thanks, Mayor. And then regarding municipal investment, I'm guessing that slide is one that makes us all feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I was curious whether we don't invest as much because we haven't had a big build in the last 10 years. So if we took a big build out of everybody else's formula, if that makes, or everybody else's investment, would we be comparable? Do you understand what I'm saying? We haven't built an arena, we haven't built a swimming pool. Other communities may have. So is that possible?
Yeah, through the chair. I think that's one possibility. And to be honest, it wasn't a slam dunk that we were going to put that slide up in front of you and include this information, but it does have a theme to it. Like as I was presenting, and I suggest that hopefully if that comes back to council or admin that you're not investing enough, I think you need to celebrate what you have invested in and the fact that you're investing way more than you used to. It's about how much you can afford to invest. I'm not sure it's as bad of a news story as it sounds, because like I said, the demand for these things is insatiable and you're always going to be asked for more. But in this case, based on those comparables and based on the limitations of the data, like I tried to caveat that as much as I could with council, based on the limitations of the reporting, that's where you ended up, sort of being. And we certainly could have been telling a story where you spend more than the comparable communities, but just based on how they've reported it, that's where it ended up. And we did average out the last 5 years to try to normalize the maybe capital. It's not supposed to be capital spending, but there is capital that shows up in that reporting sometimes. So it's imperfect information, but it's the only source that we have to compare you to your peers. And we know that council and the city compare for other things. So we thought we did it back then. We thought we would do it again now.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, to further on that point by Councillor Hoekstra, like, I wonder if like a percentage of an overall budget is a more like useful item for comparison purposes. Because yeah, I was worried about that too. Is it programming? Is it operations that we're talking about? Is it capital? A combination of both, and that's hard to compare against other communities for sure. So my real question, however, would be around the medium priority amenities. Is that would that be fair to sort of understand that as being, if it's a medium priority, then what we've got is kind of good and we should keep it as status quo. So if we have, X amount of fields in our inventory, then we probably should maintain that for the next foreseeable future. Is that kind of a fair like extrapolation of that?
Through the chair, for sure. Yeah. And that goes for things on this list that maybe you don't have. It means that service level is okay to maintain too, which means not having it.
Okay.
So that's exactly how this should be interpreted. But again, it's not meant to take away the decision making of council or administration as it relates to providing this stuff. It's, if you get into a decision that you need to make and you really want to refer to it, you can see the lenses that we used in coming up with these, like the criteria that we used in coming up with these lists. I would have went through those in more detail with council, but I would have blown my time allotment worse than I already have. So
No, I appreciate that clarification, just because I was just thinking, like, for example, if we were to lose a part of one of those amenities, I could point to this and say, well, we should probably replace that amenity if part of it's being lost or all of it's being lost, then okay, thank you.
And sorry, through the chair, I'll just clarify this one more time. It's maintaining the quality and the quantity. So even enhancing its quality and quantity, which means not necessarily more, but the ones that have that are the higher priority could mean changing the quality of the experience more so than like it. I'll use ice hockey as an example. So it's not, you need another sheet, but you might need something to elevate the experience of the user.
Thank you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I've been on the Rec and Culture Board for both of my terms, and last fall's recreation seminar was actually the best session. Was closed doors amongst other elected officials. It was because everybody was black, white, honest as how do we meet what is wanted with the outrageous millions of dollar price tag. For example, Leduc got a quote of Twin Ice Surface Arena, $44 million. And our back ice surface, to my memory, I think was built about 45 years ago. That's the last time we've had another ice surface. I think I was grade 4 or 5 back then, remember it being built. But our pool is at max, it's 25 years old. And there's one area I do disagree, all due respect, is I think it could have been presented as, like Councillor Hibbs is saying, cost per capita, operations cost per capita. But yet I do, because some of these communities like Sylvan Lake, their facilities, when they had to replace them, were outright condemned. They didn't have a choice. We're going to have to upgrade some facilities based upon capacity of usage. Our pool is maxed. Our ice surfaces, obviously, as you alluded to, are maxed. We're very wisely, timely doing a study based upon surrounding community collaboration with Black Falls and the county. I just think that has to take place to realistically meet what citizens have for expectations of, because I think we have to face reality. Not every community can have absolutely every recreation amenity. That's just not going to happen. Is Black Falls going to go build a curling rink just for the sake because they don't have one and we do? We do. But reality has to come into place. I think some true dollar figures have to be presented to citizens as this is what it would be reflected upon, because as times have changed since 2011 or 13, the COVID has changed growth of industrial, commercial, and retail business to justify paying for these amenities. And that is what I think future councils are going to really have to explore. And yet in the next 5, 10, 15 years, city is going to have to face some big bills of commitments to replace aging facilities. So a lot of information that could be provided for our next study, but I think some numbers need to be forwarded in the study that we do have coming, and with your information provided as well, is what are the two numbers that citizens are going to face in tax dollars and what these facilities are worth, because numbers are black and white. I don't think people realize what they're facing.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. That was my thought also, like we're in the process of looking at regional recreation potentially. And some of those facilities will be outside of our community, obviously. And a lot of your information seemed to be based on where you can walk to it in 10 minutes. Did you look at any other parts of that where they would, the distances that you would drive, say a 7-minute drive or 10-minute drive would be serving those individuals properly?
Through the chair. So first off, I'll just make the comment that it's great that you're looking at regional approaches, and that's a strategy that some municipalities are afforded the ability to do. Not all have good regional relationships and not all have alignment. So that's great that you're doing that. When it comes to access of facilities, so the mapping that we've provided is about trying to explain the amount of access that residents have right now as it relates to their willingness to travel, to access. The normal threshold that we would find if we asked that in a survey or there's some academic research around it is usually a 20-minute drive time. So if something can be accessed within a 20-minute drive time, people are less likely to say that travel is a barrier to them. We didn't necessarily look as much at the region as maybe we could have in this case. But if you're embarking on a study with your partners, what this plan can do is help you understand your own position going into that negotiation or that planning process.
Thank you for that clarification on the 20 minutes, because for us, even now, like a lot of our recreation is, for my grandson, for example, is in Red Deer in the Dome, and he's traveling 35 minutes to get to that Dome for indoor soccer. So I think that us looking at, something regional with Black Falls and the county and it's a 7 or 8 minute drive from Lacombe, makes a big difference for us. So thank you for that.
Councillor Dallas.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess thank you to the city and to council for having interest in this. This information is incredibly useful, and I'm very grateful to have you here to present this and provide this. My only wish is that it was 2 weeks earlier, just in regards to some presentations to Rec and Culture Board and some community groups that could have leaned on this information for their presentation. So I'm grateful for this. I think it's going to be incredibly valuable going forward in the long term, but also for short-term projects as well. So thanks.
Thank you. I was just curious with the amenity prioritization slide, not the results slide, but the other one. I wasn't sure that I necessarily understood. No, it was. Keep going.
Quickly. Are you looking for the list?
Yes, it was the list that. Yeah.
Okay. So
it was one like that, but it wasn't. It must not have been the high priority one. I was just curious. Those priorities, is that to indicate the one that was said playgrounds, for instance, weren't a high priority? I'm just curious, is that because the city has done such a marvelous job with replacing whatnot that the public is pleased with the way they are now, or that they generally are not seen as a priority there? That was the one there I was referring to.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I mean, that's a really good example of why this is hard work. Like, I shouldn't be able to stand in front of council and say playgrounds are a lower priority. But based on using the criteria, which again, I didn't really have a chance to go through with council in detail, but I'll just maybe flash them up there so you can see. When you look at things like general public benefit, look at financial, like cost, future proofing, the ability to use that piece of infrastructure for something else in case of emergency or something like that. And using that logic and comparing playgrounds to other amenities, it actually ends up kind of in that zone, which is weird, which is why I wouldn't expect that, like I said before, council would go from top to bottom and just use that for your decision making. But it's just meant to say there are ways that you can think about service provision in recreation and culture, and the same could be said in some of your other areas too, that are different than your traditional ways that you've done it. Or, and I don't want to offend anybody by saying, but we all have bias that we've grown into throughout our life, and sometimes this kind of thinking can challenge those bias and may change a decision or may not change a decision that you ultimately have to make. But it is peculiar to see that result. That's why we provide the transparency of how things are scored and why they end up the way they are in a way that is based on some criteria.
No, and I appreciate that, but there was certainly some things that jumped off the page of me. That was one of them. The other one I think one to do with ice arenas, and we had indicated there was somewhere around a mid 70% usage of the current arena.
It was 93, I think, of prime time for the arenas.
Right, but overall, and I guess you partially answered my follow-up question. Then it was going to be, is that just an indication that there are many groups that really only want prime time use, or is it an indication of the amenity overall? They just want more of it regardless. But is it the prime time usage?
To the chair, for sure, it's the prime time usage, especially for rental facilities like even ball diamonds and sports fields fall in the same category. They're just a little harder to, the capacity and achieving capacity is a little harder because of weather and smoke and stuff like that. That's why you don't see those numbers as high. But those prime time hours for any of your rental facilities are going to be close to capacity, or we're close to capacity. But that's only the window of time when you 5 to 11 p.m. weeknights where everybody wants to use it. Then it's not realistic for some of those markets to use some of those assets in different times. Sometimes they do get used, but it's common for the analysis, the utilization analysis for those types of facilities to focus on prime time like we did in the summary.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Well, we certainly appreciate you coming and presenting to us. That is a tremendous amount of information for us to distill, but it will hopefully provide us some basis for some future decisions, and we thank you for it.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to do this. It is actually cool to look back 10 years and do something like this. And if I can leave you with anything, I think I hope council and admin feel good about what's happened over the last 10 years, because you have made some significant investment. And I hope that, some of those other slides that talked about maybe you're not spending quite as much as your peers, hopefully that doesn't overshadow the ability to celebrate what you have. You have a really nice community with a good level of service.
So well, I appreciate those comments, and that causes one more question for me. One that we didn't really go over was structured and non-structured type recreation, and could that be a possible indication that some of those dollars are being spent wisely here on those types of non-structured activities, outdoor trails, ice surfaces, those types of things, and better bang for your buck than perhaps they are being maximized in other communities?
To the chair, for sure. And I would also say that concept or idea is represented in how we came up with those priorities too. You'll see that some of the ones that are in the higher priority list do have that. They're more accessible. There's less barriers to participation for those types of amenities than some of the ones that are on the lower list. But for sure, that could be reflected in kind of how that assessment panned out for the city too.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll let our next presenter move in to the hot seat. And I understand that President and CEO of Vasa is here. Scott Cameron, always a pleasure. Initially, we had you down with a couple of associates to help you, but I understand you're looking after things by yourself this
Yeah.
evening.
They left it in my hands today, so we'll see how that turns out. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Your Worship, members of council. Thank you. We're here tonight to present the second phase of the social needs assessment and prioritization report, and we've very much enjoyed this work, working with the team that you have here at the City of Lacombe. And so we'll just jump right into it. Now I'm going this way, I think. There we go. So just to review, you had a social needs assessment that was conducted in 2020, 2021. And we certainly wanted to use that as a foundation for some of the work that we move forward with. You had identified 2 phases for this project. My team members brought the first phase to council in July. And then we moved on to phase 2, which was really phase 1 being, what are the priorities? And the second phase being, so what are we going to do about these priorities? And so the second phase was a little bit quicker than the first phase. And but nonetheless, we heard from many people in the community. I'm doing 2 things at a time here. So in the work that we're doing, engagement is really significant part of our work, because it gives us an opportunity to be able to work with the community members and the groups and organizations that are engaged in social development in the community, and actually hopefully bring them along in terms of some of their learning and understanding and sharing of the information that we've discovered. So the process was really starting with council workshop, moving into some key informant interviews, some focus groups, diving into some of the demographic and socioeconomic trends, hosting a prioritization workshop. Those were all components in the first phase. And then in the second phase, we did a community survey, which was used primarily for validation purposes. And we'll talk a little bit about what your community members thought about some of the priorities that emerged out of the first phase. And then moved into the community conference, and finally the reporting and presentation here with you tonight. So what's shifted from the time that we did the council workshop back in, I'm looking over to Guy, I'm guessing it was March-ish, seems to be. We asked you to participate in an exercise to identify what some of the top priorities might be. At that time, you had identified affordable housing and homelessness, addictions, mental health, domestic and relationship violence, and social needs awareness and communications. So I would suggest that you have a pretty good pulse on your community, because when you take a look at the priorities that emerged out of the prioritization workshop, community action on mental health, community support for families, healthy homes and neighborhoods, and getting around and community access. So not far from what you had initially thought of, but you can see in between there that there were some other ideas that emerged as priorities for folks in the community. Then in the community conference, we said, so what are we going to do about these 4 priorities? The first one is targeted actions on the social needs priorities. So, what are we going to do about each one of these priorities? But then part of the conversation with the FCSS team that we're helping to facilitate the tables at the community conference was, what were we hearing across the different priorities? And there were really 3 big themes that emerged across the priorities: awareness and communications, connecting people, and affirming community aspirations. So we'll dive into each of these a little bit as we move through the presentation. I indicated that we did a validation survey after phase 1, and kudos to Sandy for being out at events and talking to people and making sure that everyone had an opportunity to weigh in on these. So you can see that on the community action on mental health and addictions, we broke this down by 3 different perspectives. First of all, how important is it to you? How important is it to someone close to you? Or how important is it to the community overall? And you see some variations, but you see a high level of agreement across all 4 of those priorities. So in terms of the actions on each one of the priority areas, the future state was identified through the workshops back in phase 1. And so the key strategies related to mental health and addictions focus on creating an asset map. So what are the programs, services, and supports available in the community, and how do they relate with one another? Developing local protocols so that when folks show up at any one of the agencies or organizations in the community, that there's a sense of where do we send them? How do we advise them? How do they engage with the different assets or programs and services in mental health and addictions? And finally, the third one is on a municipal task force to engage with Recovery Alberta. As you'll find in the social needs assessment, not everything that was identified as a priority for the City of Lacombe is actually the City of Lacombe's responsibility by legislation or regulation. So in this case, taking municipal leadership to work with Recovery Alberta shows leadership, especially for folks that are experiencing mental health or addictions, that you care about those members of your community to the extent that you want to be able to have a conversation and express to the province of Alberta how much mental health and addictions is important for you and your community. I would also say, based on our work in other communities in the central region, you're not the only ones that are seeing this recommendation. And so if you look at the other communities in and around central region, Innisfail, I think we're meeting with them next Monday with their community safety and well-being strategy. Mental health and addictions appears. So there are things that you could do with the other municipalities to let the province of Alberta know that this is a topic of concern for residents in your community. In terms of community support for families, there was discussion about revision or developing a funding framework for the FCSS Community Grant Program, being a little bit more specific about what do we intend these funds to do, how do we want to use them, what are we hoping to achieve out of those community funds. Fostering community partnerships and collaborative approaches. Right now you have an active interagency council. Going that next level says, okay, rather than just sharing information, how do we actually build our programs and services so that they fit best together? Who's doing what parts? How are we referring one another to each other's programs? And how are we building sort of a whole approach to supporting individuals and families? And the third one would be deliberate approach. And we use the word newcomer here, not necessarily to indicate folks new to the country or new Canadians, but newcomers to your community. You have an aging population. If you're going to grow your economy, if you're going to continue to grow your population, you have to be able to attract more individuals and families. And those individuals and families have to be able to find their way in the community, create that sense of connection and belonging quickly so that they stay. And one of the factors in that is affordability. So things like housing and transportation, those types of things really impact the ability of a family to be able to set down roots in a community. In terms of getting around and community access, I was listening carefully to the conversation about access to recreation amenities and supports. And certainly getting around and community access were blended together. Part of it is that physical mobility. We heard lots of folks saying how much they appreciate the trails. You know, occasionally you hear somebody say, yeah, but there's sidewalks that come to an end, or a trail that comes to an end, or something. And I know that the municipality has been doing a lot of work exploring that. Certainly lots of conversation about transit, about public transportation. We didn't want to push too hard in terms of what that might look like, but certainly there's a segment of your population that does not drive. Whether it's the youth, whether it's people experiencing lower income, whether it's seniors that are no longer mobile. But at the community conference, it wasn't just about put in a bus. It was very open to looking for alternatives. What are the other options available to us as a municipality, whether it's ride share programs or scooters or golf carts or whatever it might be. And then also looking to partner with other groups and organizations that have maybe some of the assets already in their inventory, and how do you make better use of them so that it's more than just the individuals that that asset is intended to support. Some of the other broader access issues in terms of programs and services are addressed in some of the overarching strategies. In terms of the healthy homes and neighborhoods, certainly the world has changed since the 2019 housing needs assessment. So creating the opportunity to pull that out, look at how things have shifted or changed since the pandemic. Continuing to use your regulatory authority, because it's certainly that is the biggest role that the municipality plays in housing, is how you zone and how you use the land within your municipality, and also take a look at different funding mechanisms to enhance affordable housing. What options exist for you to be able to do things differently? And we've had some conversations in some of your neighboring communities about different innovations that they could explore. The third one is really, I wasn't chuckling at all. I was just like, yeah, this all makes sense. The work that you're talking about on the recreation side with the county and the town of Black Falls. Taking an intermunicipal and regional approach to housing development is something that we've been having conversations with some of your neighboring communities about as well. We start to see spillover from people that want to get out of the city. And so we start to see people that are moving from Lacombe to Innisfail to Sylvan Lake to Stettler to wherever in search of supports and services. And I think there's none of the municipalities want to really stand up and say, hey, we'll provide the full suite of supports and services for people experiencing homelessness, because you will get what you hope for. However, if Lacombe has some supports and services and Innisfail has some and Sylvan Lake has some and Black Falls and so on, then you have a broader regional approach and supporting the larger center, being Red Deer, that is beyond its capacity to be able to receive and support everyone. But through coordinated efforts, there are opportunities to be able to spread that support around the region. In terms of the broad community strategies, 3 themes consistently emerged out of the community conference: awareness and communications, connecting people, and affirming community aspirations. So let's take a quick look at each one of those. In terms of awareness and communications, there's a growing distrust in institutions. And I would say that's not just, it's not a municipal thing. In fact, I think municipalities are probably far better off in terms of trust with their constituents than provincial or national governments. I would suggest that most residents continue to see their municipality as a trusted source for information. We talked about diverse options for information dissemination, but really what happened in that conversation was about flipping that upside down and saying maybe the role for the municipality or for some coordinated services is a unified source of collection. And then each of those organizations that are contributing information could then disseminate it to their clients in a way that makes sense to their groups and organizations or their individuals that are sharing. An example of this in the Active Living Fair, following the community conversation or the community conference, we had two Post-it notes. One said Facebook, the other said anything but Facebook. So when you're trying to look for a way to unify and take everybody to one source of finding things, you'll never get agreement. So we thought, let's flip it upside down. If we could find one source of collecting, then everybody could disseminate it in a different way. So also innovative approaches to community access, as I said, on the transportation side. The folks, of course, they are looking for transit or transportation options within the municipality, but also to neighboring communities, namely Red Deer. But they're also open to exploring different ideas around that. And then increased information sharing between organizations. Again, that example of using the interagency group to continue sharing information and working together. In terms of connecting people, neighbor building initiatives, lots of great ideas, things that the municipality is already doing, things like block parties, community gardens. I would say that you've got tremendous support from your community to continue investing in those types of things that help people connect with one another where they live, so that they're getting to know one another. This concept of no strings attached community programming, I can remember the table that that sort of moniker came from. It was really speaking to things like Music in the Park and Echo Food Rescue and things that are really low barrier for folks to be able to participate in. They don't have to sign up. They don't have to commit to 8 weeks. They don't have to, do all those things. They can participate in a way that doesn't sort of accentuate the fact that they may or may not have as much income as somebody else that they're sitting beside. So that no strings attached community programming is something that came directly out of the community conference. Bridging social capital refers to looking for those opportunities to connect different bonded social groups, whether it's people of a certain economic stature, somebody, faith community, for example, different interest groups, your pride societies, looking for those opportunities to bring groups and organizations together so that you don't end up with a community of silos, and certainly no indication of siloing, but encouragement to continue looking for those opportunities. And then promoting a culture of helping one another. And this kind of stems back to the first one on the neighbor building initiatives. Encouraging people to reach out, get to know their neighbor, offer that support with, I'll use the example of a new neighbor that my mother met that came in and helped with a few minor home repairs. And when she said, "Oh, I'd love to, I want to pay you for that help," and they were like, "No, we're neighbors. That's what neighbors do." And encouraging that type of support and connection and networking at the neighborhood level. In terms of affirming community aspirations, this one took us some time to figure out what the language around this would be. I think the big narrative for Lacombe from a social well-being perspective is that Lacombe has a high level of social well-being for most. But there are folks in the community that aren't enjoying that same level of prosperity and sense of connection and belonging. So how do we continue to affirm all those things that Lacombe aspires to be, but making sure that it works for everyone? So facilitating inclusive dialogue about community goals, making sure that everybody has an opportunity to talk about what's important to them. Stigma was a theme that came through right from some of the early conversations, right back to the key informant interviews. And it really, when we talked about stigma in the community, there was two big component parts. One was stigma relative to mental health addictions. So the stigma that folks carry for themselves, that they are feeling too ashamed to, or lack the self-esteem to ask for help, or feel lesser than because they're asking for help. So there's an opportunity to normalize the notion of asking for help, that it's okay, it's welcome and encouraged. And the second was stigma around housing and different housing forms. So on that one, talking about the benefit of multifamily housing or the benefit of higher density units when you're not faced with a decision about a particular piece of property. So talking about the value of different housing forms so that everyone can find a home here in Lacombe. Empowering residents through participatory planning. I will give credit to Sandy for sure, but Lacombe is a community that shows up. And so when we were doing events and activities and having conversations, we had rooms full of people, and that was great. We don't see that in every community. And so continue empowering your residents through that participatory planning. Supporting community-led initiatives. I think in the recreation side, you certainly make great use of volunteers, and there are people, your faith groups, your organizations, they identify something that needs to be done. They get together, they figure out how they're going to do it, and they do it. And we don't see that in every community either. And having long roots in this community, I think that stems back, I would say, decades. And I would suggest that you continue supporting community-led initiatives in the community. And then looking for opportunities to monitor progress and celebrating successes. This one was a freebie, if you will. It was adopted from the City of Red Deer Social Policy Framework. We were having conversations with your admin team about the different roles and responsibilities. We shared this document with them. And what we find with just having a language of 10 different ways that you can show up in terms of social development, some of them are more intensive, so service delivery. And I've shared this with many FCSS programs around the province. Sometimes we find a gap. We figure the only way to be able to deal with it is create a new program and deliver the service ourselves. But that's not always the best way to do it. So there's other things that can be done. And I would suggest that in this report, things like convening and coordinating can support your community in a big way. So this list of roles and responsibilities is really just there as a reference, so that if you want to sort of figure out as a municipality how you need to show up in some of these things, especially when they're not all part of a municipal responsibility, there's still things you can do to show up and support those initiatives. We then further broke down some of the strategies into shorter term, longer term, and ongoing strategies. And I can certainly walk through these, but we did try to group them according to some of the priority areas. So the first one being the mental health and addictions, the second being around connecting community and so on. And they're broken down even further and somewhat color coded in the larger report. So I can sort of move through these. We talk about exploring a public transit system, looking at innovative funding mechanisms to support affordable housing, and we've spoken to those pieces. And then these ones are things that just as you go through this work to keep in mind in terms of facilitating inclusive dialogue, reducing stigma. I think checking your own biases when it comes to things like housing forms, mental health, addictions, those types of things really go a long way to helping people in your community. And that would be my presentation. So I'll turn it back over to yourself, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Scott. Certainly lots of information there for us to consider. Anyone have any questions or comments? Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Thank you for your report. Your report, like the previous presenter's report, are very lengthy. You've done a summary here. In essence, the attached report that we'll see later on is very long. But I did really like the two slides you had in that they talked about in summary, the short-term strategies and the long-term strategies. I think those are, you've kind of put it into a nutshell there. That's something that we can actually kind of look at and think, okay, maybe these are things that we can tackle. Because as you mentioned, there are things that when it comes to mental health and affordable housing that are kind of in our purview, but out of our purview as well. So for me, this is the best two slides here where they talked about the short-term and long-term strategies, because there's a lot of things I think that we can take away from just these two slides that maybe we can. But overall, yeah, the report was terrific, but I particularly like these two slides. Thank you.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, your report was great. I did like those slides also, as Councillor Koenig alluded to. The transportation side of it, I was the one that made the motion to get rid of our Bolt bus. So I understand the concerns in our community about that. And I'd like to see us get to a transportation system within our community. So I appreciate you showing that there is an importance to that. And even though it's in the long-term strategies, I think it's something that we need to address in the next couple of years and get something that really will work for the people that do need that additional assistance to get around our community. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate your process. You have kept us engaged all the way along, and consequently, I think none of this is new to us now, because we've just been getting mini reports along the way. So thank you for those recommendations. I do think maybe because this is your community a bit too, there was some connection there that worked really well in terms of understanding some of the information. And so I appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Looks like to me, Councillor Ross, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Thank you for the great detail, and I've taken it, like I'll echo Councillor Hoekstra's, you've taken a lengthy integration into the community. I think also you've got some heart into it as well, but I think we have to keep in mind that this is a report and a platform that many different agencies across the city can use. So keeping in mind that it's, you know, kind of a strategic plan of an opportunity for everybody to have a basis on. No one agency can deliver all this. I don't think any agency should be expected, as we discussed in FCSS. There's a little bit of maybe being overwhelmed that FCSS had a responsibility to deliver this. They don't. I kind of kept reiterating to them, this is a platform that was a part of the city's strategic plan to deliver in this term. So, you know, but this is very detailed, great information for many to utilize that deliver the wellness of the citizens of Lacombe. And I think there are many already strengths, and there are areas that we can always improve on. So, but I very much appreciate the report and the detail. It's very, very vastly, significantly better than the previous attempt, I guess I'll say. So thank you.
As you can tell, we appreciate your insight, Scott.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
presenting here tonight.
Great. Thanks so much.
So we'll move into requests for decision. And the first one up, led by Director Lapointe, is item 6.1, Recreation and Culture Refresh.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and Council. This evening, administration presents the Recreation and Culture Plan update for Council's review and approval. Council's strategic plan identifies updating the Recreation and Culture Master Plan by the end of this year. Earlier tonight, RC Strategies presented their summary findings for that update. As you recall, the plan is 11 years old, and this update is intended to provide Council with current information to inform future recreation and cultural infrastructure investment. The previous plan did this by advancing new recreation projects, including 5 new and replaced playgrounds, enhanced trails, and the Len Thompson Fish Pond accessible dock. Cultural investments included a new performing arts center, murals, and the Echo Performance Stage. To gather the information needed for the update, administration consulted residents through household group and youth surveys. Surveys were promoted via direct mail to households, utility backs, social media, radio, city pages, a dedicated web page, and Lacombe County News, as well as in person at the Spring Trade Show and Lacombe Farmers Markets. After tonight's presentation, administration recommends that the Recreation and Culture Master Plan be returned to council for consideration and approval at their upcoming November 12th, 2024 meeting. Alternatively, council may discuss the plan in detail by establishing a committee of the whole meeting on a date of your choosing. With that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I was just a curious question for administration. What more information do we need? Like I read through the whole report tonight. Why are we not able to approve it tonight? Guess I'm curious about that, and then I'll follow up.
You certainly can, but we have a practice of having the presentations and then bringing them to a future meeting so that you're not expected to make a decision that night. And so we really wanted to make sure you had an opportunity, if you wanted to discuss it more, to set a committee meeting or maybe provide some feedback that we could provide to finalize the document. If you're satisfied with it, as you indicated, then certainly you could adopt it tonight.
I do have a follow-up question.
Certainly.
I am somewhat satisfied. I guess I'm just in relation, we have our budget workshops tomorrow and the next day, and I feel like these are guiding documents that we should keep in mind as we're making decisions. And so by not approving them tonight, are we then lobbying them forward into 2025? And that concerns me, even though I know that we're not 100% approving the budget tomorrow, but that's just my concern. I like that these would be guiding documents for our discussions tomorrow. So that's where my comment came from. But I did actually have a question about, in the report, it says, I'm going to say on page 15, sorry, I should know it, but it refers to the, it's on page 18 of your actual report. It says, an update to the Recreation and Culture Master Plans. It says it's important to note that the foundations presented on page 16 of the 2013 Master Plan remained valid. I guess I was curious what those foundations were, because do I have a copy of the 2013 report? Maybe I do on a link that I didn't look at, but I was really curious what those because this is quite something that we have a report that's coming out of 2013 that's still valid, and we're really building on it. So I was curious what those foundations, what you're referring to there. I guess I'm looking over there, but I should be looking to Director LaPointe, sorry.
I think if you look at the report, there are several statements that are made, and then there are red highlighted sections that they're adding on to. And so I think the idea is that the basis of the plan is still very relevant with the additions that they're suggesting as well.
So not specific foundations, it's just the plan in general. Okay.
Councillor Hoekstra, appreciate your perspective on that. I'm just wondering if there might not be some value in postponing that endorsement to a later date, simply for some time for the public to ruminate about some of the items in here as well. There's nothing to say that we can't use this information contained with here, which I think is all quite valid for our discussions for budgetary purposes, Councillor Hoekstra, but I'm just not necessarily sure I draw the same conclusion about the necessarily approving it this evening to somehow validate it for that use only. That would be my only input, but certainly open to opinion of council as a whole for sure. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just a question for Director CEO. What is the time frame of our regional collaboration study? As long as this is template or framework is passed before that starts. So this could possibly be used for information where our community and citizens have a area of interest that it can be used for going forward for what facilities may be of importance, as has already been citizens have been emphasized and by the surveys as to what are priorities, high, medium, and low. So I guess another one maybe in future, I would be curious to know and come back in citizens as what are we spending per capita in relation to other communities? Because all due respect, sometimes we hear as well, this community's got that, and Lacombe doesn't, and this community's got this. It'd be nice to say this is what we are spending per capita in relation. This is what this, and I think it's pretty obvious that we have strengths in certain areas that other communities don't. But sometimes you just hear the comparisons of what we don't. And I think there's some maybe little bits of information that would be nice for us to have to pass on answers to citizens to justify our strengths and what we are doing.
So it's an interesting point. I think it would be safe to say that councillors in every community hear about their shortcomings and where there's room for improvement, just like we do. However, it's always nice to have some data to back that up. You had asked about time frame for our regional collaboration work, and I think that from the time frame that was laid out, I would suggest that we're in the infancy of that program overall, and to expect very many of the priorities that are in here, certainly the shorter range ones, to have much bearing on those would be unrealistic at this point in time. I think that was seen as more of a longer range outlook on that collaboration effort for recreation facilities for sure. But not to say that it isn't important. I just think that for our purposes over the next, say, less than up to a decade, that is not liable to have a tremendous amount of bearing on it. Would that be a fair assessment, CEO Gowdy?
Certainly, sorry, to the chair and through to Councillor Ross. It is an October 2025 submission deadline for the Alberta Capital or Alberta Community Partnership grant that's going to look at the feasibility of a regional recreation facility. So it's, I hate to say it even, but it's probably years, a couple of years until you receive that information back and really have an idea of the feasibility of that. So I wouldn't say tying the two together would be a good idea at this point.
I believe there was one other question. I'm not sure if that has been addressed.
Thank you, McCreasy. I guess when was that other study going to start? Yes, as long as we obligationally fulfill our commitments to proving this prior to the other one starting, which obviously it sounds like we will be in sufficient time.
Yeah, assuming the grant application is successful, then I would see that starting potentially late next year or early the year after. We did actually originally have, I was just discussing with Director Lapointe here, we did have per capita numbers in that report originally. But just due to some of the reporting, the way the numbers are reported, as our colleague said, there's supposed to be no capital in some of those, but there clearly was capital in some reports. And so it really provided some skewed numbers. And so we ultimately went with the totals rather than the per capita numbers.
Once again, that can have a significant bearing on that data when you are including some capital into it, especially if it's not equal across several comparator communities. Kind of skews the results, but yeah. Out of those plans that we were talking about, there was some very positive information. I think that we owe some gratitude to Director Lapointe for his impact that he's had on those areas of our community over the past nearly decade and a half. And I know you've had lots of help, and we can't credit you solely with it. With some pretty tremendous staff, but thank you once again, as I know your time with Lacombe is drawing closer to its finality, but needless to say, we appreciate your past efforts and the impact, the very positive impact that it has had on our community. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. If it's okay, then I would like to move that council directs administration to return the Recreation and Culture Master Plan for approval at their November 12th, 2024 meeting.
Thank you for that. Any additional comments? Please go ahead and vote. And you will note that there is one fewer ballot to be cast on this one. Councillor Hibbs had a prior engagement that was unavoidable. And therefore that is unanimous in support. Thank you. Director Lapointe, item 6.2, the social needs assessment and prioritization report, second phase. I'm sorry, T.O. Gowdy.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Excuse me. I do just want to clarify the statement I just made about per capita. I went back to the report. We don't have the per capita in there, but we do have the percentage of the municipal budget that is spent on recreation, and it is in line with the comparator communities at about 22% today. So the per capita isn't strictly there, but the overall proportion of the budget allocated to recreation is about 1/5 of the municipal budget.
Which ought to have some bearing on the other number that you talk about. It's not going to be too far skewed anyway, which I think is a little more accurate representation. It's not to raise any flags that somehow we're severely lacking, because the overall satisfaction of the community seems to be rather high. Sorry for that interruption. Director Lapointe, please proceed.
Thank you. This evening, administration is presenting the social needs assessment and prioritization report for council review and approval. The report took shape over 2 phases, with phase 1 providing 4 priority areas for the community to focus on, those being community action on mental health and addictions, support for families, getting around and community access, and then finally healthy homes and neighborhoods. Council approved phase 1 on their July 8th meeting and directed administration to complete phase 2, which included short, medium, and long-term goals for each of the 4 priority areas by the end of 2024. Phase 2 involved more engagement over the summer with a follow-up survey, community conference, and a presence at the Fall Active Living Fair. And this evening, BASA Social Innovations presented those additional research results. Similar to the Recreation and Culture Master Plan approach, to provide council with adequate time to reflect and review the information received, administration recommends returning the report to the November 12th meeting for final approval. Alternatively, council may schedule a committee of the whole meeting for a broader report discussion. With that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
Same comment. Thank you, Mayor Creasy. This one, I definitely would like to support this report tonight, like to approve this report, knowing that the FCSS board did so on October 16th. And we have been we've been walked along in this process the whole way. So I would definitely like to move that we approve the social needs assessment and priorities final report. I think that's.
Thank you. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I can appreciate the fact you made that motion, Councillor Hoekstra, but I'm just wondering, my question to administration then is, if we approve it tonight, when will we get any ideas or some strategies as to tackle the long-term and short-term suggestions? I was kind of hoping that might come at the November 12th meeting, but if we approve it tonight, when can those, is it just strictly through budget? Is it strictly through, will there be a follow-up agenda item that will look at those short-term, long-term strategies, or what's the game plan there?
So it'd be a combination of through your budgeting process and your strategic planning update that's coming in the spring. And then as you embark, or as council embarks on a new strategic plan for the future, I think that would be where it would inform those decisions. We had not anticipated bringing a list of specific tactics that we think would be in support of the identified priorities, but rather that they would be weaved throughout council's decision-making process in the coming months and years.
Director Lapointe.
If I may just follow that up, I do think that there is also a plan to return this document, once approved, to interagency. So that's the group that meets with groups across the city. And so we can tackle it there as well in terms of developing priorities, perhaps talking about how to link them to funding, ways that we can support each other in terms of delivering that plan. So that was part of the work as well.
So just so we're clear, before we consider this motion, are there any downsides to looking at approving this evening as opposed to the initially proposed date in November?
None that I see. I actually kind of agree with Councillor Hoekstra that really, because there's been involvement every step of the way, this is more of a formality. It's already been kind of endorsed by council's participation. And so I think it already is in the mindset of council. Now, if there is a desire for a follow-up implementation plan or a implementation strategy, that was what we had kind of thought might come at a committee meeting, that we would say, well, what do you see as the follow-up, and what do you want to see coming forward? So there might be a hybrid approach there where you adopt it this evening, but also ask for a committee meeting to talk about one or both plans further.
Thank you. Anyone before consideration of the motion? That is on your voting machines now. Please proceed to vote. And that item is approved unanimously. Thanks, Council. The next item is the City Hall renovation update. Director Piche, you've been waiting patiently. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Creasy, and good evening, Council. Before Council this evening is the City Hall renovation project. To provide some background information to where the project stands to date, the following has occurred. In 2021, City Hall underwent some renovations that included the council chambers, the downstairs hallway and bathrooms, and the staff lunchroom. During this renovation, a new sewer line was installed to fix a low-laying line in the basement, and this line previously caused a lot of backups and some unpleasant odors. Following this, a renovation for the front office and foyer was planned, aiming to improve both space efficiency and security. In 2023, administration hired an interior designer to receive 3 design concepts, and they were created to modernize and secure the front office area. Once a design was decided upon, a third-party contractor estimated the renovation to be about $230,000, and the city had about $562,000 allocated in the capital budget to cover that renovation and furniture and any accommodation for the displaced staff. Later, it was found that that estimate was well below budget. An RFP was issued to source out qualified contractors. However, the bids all exceeded the budget. A request was made in 2024 budget deliberations to increase the budget by $140,000. Council deferred the consideration of the project until 2025. To prepare for that, throughout 2024, administration collaborated with the designer to come up with a design that focused only on the renovation of the finance department and the planning and development area to improve the functionality and secured staff access and to be within the allocated budget. The design update, pardon me, the updated design layout, which is attached in your council RFD, includes several key changes. Extension of the public counter, separating public areas and staff areas, expansion of the public planning and development area into the hallway, and creating more space for staff. A secured swipe access in the foyer and an additional meeting room with dual access would also be installed. Adjustments in the finance areas to remove the curved wall and create space for an additional cubicle. And then that would also include relocating the mayor's office door into the secured area. The layout achieves multiple objectives. It improves the functionality and the additional meeting space. It is an accessible section will be added to the service counter for public interactions, and then enhanced security for staff areas, allowing the public access only as needed with staff escorting them into the back areas. So construction is expected to take around 3 months, and the staff in public safety remain a priority. Public-facing staff would be temporarily housed in city-owned buildings, and non-public facing staff may work from alternate locations if needed due to the noise or other disruptions. Council meetings are planned to continue without interruption. That was part of the RFP, and that Mondays evenings were always going to be accessible for chamber use. We received on the second round of bids, we only received two bids, and of them, one was at $319,486, and the other was $549,477. Neither of the bids include furniture, so administration will work with the interior designer to source the necessary furnishings. At this time, administration is recommending to move forward with the City Hall renovation project and to use city-owned locations to accommodate staff and provide service to the public during the renovations. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Director Pichet. Not seeing a fury of lights here. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. In your report, you say that IMC Construction did not include a contingency in their bid. What is the normal percentage? I know this percentage. What's the normal percentage for contingency?
I believe it's around 10%.
Okay, so that will bring them up. Okay. My second question is, I know we have it somewhere. It'd have been nice to see the first rendition of the renos compared to this one, just to see. I couldn't remember because to me it looks very similar to the first round of drawings. But my question is that we're improving security on this main level with fob access doors. Is there something that will be done going down the stairs as well to access the basement? Will that be fob access as well?
Yes, that we just focused on the upstairs drawings for the design, but it does include access doors with swipe access in the basement as well.
At the bottom of the stairs.
At the bottom of the stairs, yes.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Has there been a lot of incidents where this would have been required or preferred?
Are you talking security?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We've had one or two incidents where somebody from the public has gone to the back to speak with staff without any approved access or authorized access. There hasn't been anything where people have been violently threatened or anything like that.
I hate to put any more money into this building, to be honest with you. I don't like that at all. Because the future of this is certainly not long-term. Was there any consideration given to just improving the security alone without a lot of renovation? Was there any possibilities with that? No,
not a lot. Sorry.
All right, I find it really hard to vote to spend money on this building. Thank you.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I somewhat kind of have mixed feelings because here the Public Works building, what we spent between the roof and the bathroom and renovations of $400,000 or $500,000, and then turn around and within 3-4 years later replace the whole facility. When we look at our 10-year capital plan, and I could kind of somewhat agree, is when do we keep lipsticking a facility that's a building that's only got so many length times width square feet? Do we, really just, have a long-term plan? Because that $500,000 on Public Works could have went towards probably an upgraded building that would have been more energy efficient and more longevity of longer years. And that was kind of really frustrating. And, $300,000 or $400,000 more, $100,000 into this facility when what, $2 million would, I have no idea. $2 million builds a new building? I have no idea. I'm just guessing, and please correct me. I'm sure you probably already know, but I don't know. I just somewhat kind of, I don't like the idea of how we did Public Works, where we put $500,000 and then within 3 or 4 years later, we replaced the whole thing. That was one of those decisions I can look back on that was not fiscally responsible.
Councillor Dallas?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I believe this is the third time this has come back as a request. So in my mind, I believe that there is importance placed on this, and it is not just a frivolous ask. I also don't believe that this building is not long for us, since nobody has put forward a plan to replace it, and there isn't anything in the future. As much as we maybe don't want to invest in a facility like this, it seems like we aren't doing anything to replace it or to find an alternative to invest in this facility. And, this is the third rendition that I think we need to start supporting it, or when we say no here, we had better make a plan to replace it in the very near future. So I will be saying yes to this, but unless someone else has a better alternative for me.
Thank you. So I think in order to be open with the public, we need to be honest about this whole near and far and future plans. I don't think that anybody has been secretive about the fact that this building has a finite lifespan, and we can put a number on it. I'll go on a limb and say it's somewhere between in the area of 15 years. I would think might be a little long, a little short, whatever. Somehow we have to see our way through to be able to get to that far, so it aligns with our longer range capital plans, because it will need to be replaced. I don't think there's any question about that. Replaced would be my preference as opposed to a substantial redo, because it's aging out, and I think the monies that we have spent on it, I feel justified. Rarely are renovations underpriced or under budget. I don't know. I struggle the same way as Councillor Gullickson does in putting money into a structure that certainly does not have the lifespan of what we consider on our new municipal buildings. However, I do also want to have a building here that represents our community well and also is up to a standard that we want for all of our municipal employees. I think that was an important ask as far as the security aspect. Of course, security is important. However, we do need to be realistic in the fact that I think we have had precious few incidents that would really justify any type of substantial upgrades all on its own. It's not to say there isn't other factors here. So for me, somewhere in the balance is this one number in the $300,000 range that somewhat reluctantly I could still support, with the hopes that it'll accomplish our goals and move this building along for another decade and a half or so. But yeah, it's never an easy decision, especially in renovations for me. But that's kind of where I stand. I'm not, to suggest that I'm totally thrilled about it would be wrong. But I also see the reasoning why, and I think that it's realistic in its outline. I don't think there's, maybe I'm going out on a limb to say, I don't think there's an awful lot of surprises that should be in that type of work. Whereas before we were doing some substantial plumbing and some outdoor work that was more unknowns in my opinion. But in a roundabout way, I guess I'm saying that in fact I will be supporting this item, but somewhat reluctantly. Councillor Koenig.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Yeah, I 100% support it. I mean, I just quickly looked at our 10-year capital plan and we don't make any, I believe it's 2034 where we make the first allotment of monies toward a new city hall, but doesn't mean it gets built then. It's still down the road yet. So we're going to be in this building for a while. I apologize, Councillor Ross, when I laughed, you said 2 million. We can build a city hall for $2 million. Let's do it now. But I feel that that number's 3 times as high, if not more. So, yeah, I get Councillor Gullickson's and the mayor's reluctance, but for $300-some thousand, I think it'll go a long ways to. And yeah, we haven't had security issues yet, and hopefully we don't. But I just walked into this building today and walked all the way through it because I had to see someone downstairs, and I walked upstairs and I walked all over it. And clearly I'm not a threat, but you know, the next person could come in here and who knows, right? So I really like the idea of the enhanced security, and I think it's good money that we're going to be in this building for a while yet. So to that end, then I will make the motion that council directs administration to award the City Hall renovation project to IMC Construction Limited. Thank you.
Thank you. CEO Gowdy, your light is on, and I apologize. It's been on for quite some time. You obviously had something to add. I thought you had left it on from a previous comment. Did you have something?
No, I did have something to add, but
My apologies.
that does happen. from
Please
time to
proceed.
time, So
Yeah, I would say first time ever, right?
I also just wanted to apologize through the chair to Councillor Ross. I scoffed at the $2 million. That was not appropriate. And if you, as council, directed us to design a building for $2 million, we would do our damnedest to do it. However, we right now have $2.5 million allocated in 2034 in your proposed 10-year capital budget. And when we've looked at other similar facilities or facilities for similar sized communities that we would expect to construct here, we were looking that would be the first amount of 3 or 4 years of funding at that level. When we've looked at other facilities, 10 to 12 million is not unreasonable for some of these city halls. And when you add inflation, it would be reasonable to expect that $2 million would not get you what you were looking for. And so I apologize, but that I reacted the way I did. That wasn't appropriate, but I do want to advise you that I don't think $2 million would be sufficient.
Anything additional? We do have a motion on the floor. Everybody knows what we're voting on. Very good. Please proceed to vote. saw a couple of colors on that last vote, so I'm going to wait for, that was approved, not unanimously. Councillor Gullickson voting against, and so noted. Thank you for that. So I know there's renovations to any area come with challenges, and I think that when you start adding in staff and public access and whatnot, it's particularly challenging. So I don't think that you're going to find that council is too pushy with time frame and whatnot, but we look forward to seeing some kind of a plan unfold that this can be put forward in a reasonable way moving forward. So. And Director Piche, you're up once again for the last item on request for decision. And I missed a light. Councillor Connick, please proceed.
And to your last comments, there is a second motion here that council supports using alternate city-owned locations to accommodate staff and provide service to the public during renovations.
And no additional comments? Please go ahead and vote. And I think everyone certainly understood the implications of that one, so that is unanimously in favor. Director Piche, item 6.4, process to develop the selected fire station property.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So before council this evening is the process involved to move forward, to move the fire station development forward. That being said, I want to ensure that it is understood that there are multiple points during this process where public engagement and consultation will be requested and required. On September 9th, council approved the communication and community engagement strategy. This strategy is the engagement process while moving forward with developing the fire station at 4410 Woodland Drive, specifically the South Ball Diamond. Several steps are needed to be completed to clear the property for the development before any construction process can begin. The first item is to remove the habendum clause, which is registered on title for the entire lot. The habendum clause designates the land is used for cemetery purposes only, and it must be removed from the lot before any changes of use is made to the land. Historically, the habendum clause has been added and removed on this property several times since its initial registration in 1979, with changes in 1995, 2001, 2004, and 2010. The Director of Cemeteries from the province of Alberta provided the city with the process of how to remove the clause. The first step is to develop a preliminary site plan to define the area needed for the fire station, including functional elements like the building layout, parking, and landscaping. The next step is to begin the subdivision process, and it is only to begin it by hiring a surveyor to legally survey and draft the plans. The next step is to amend any local planning documents, such as the North Area Structure Plan, the Cemetery Master Plan, or the MDP. These plans have to come back to council for approval. And then the last step is finally to submit a formal request to the Director of Cemeteries to remove the habendum clause from the designated area, including the necessary plans, surveys, and declarations. The North Area Structure Plan and the Cemetery Master Plan does have to come before council to be considered for any amendments. The Municipal Development Plan will need to have its maps updated to reflect where the new fire station will be located. The property is not to be sold or modified without the consent of the Director of Cemeteries. Once the preliminary steps are completed and the habendum clause is removed, the city then can move forward with a formal subdivision request to subdivide and separate the property of where the fire station parcel will be from the cemetery land. One of the areas of the preliminary site design is the functional element design. What that is to draft a design to assess the needs of the station itself. This design is used to determine any primary required elements, space utilization, operational workflow, and safety. Administration will issue an RFP to engage an architect for this design phase. A committee to include the council members, fire staff, administration, and other contributing stakeholders is planned to be struck. Council is invited to select 1 or 2 members to join the Functional Element Design Committee, which will also tour local fire stations to learn best practices and building standards. So where we are right now and the next steps that will take us to move forward is to draft and release the RFP to secure an architect for the functional element design, to survey the land and to confirm subdivision boundaries, issue a media release to inform the public about the site selection for the new fire station, notify stakeholders about the property's development change, develop a survey to gauge the current fire station's impact on the neighboring properties, and then to approve an update to the standard operating procedure for vehicle operations, specifically the use of lights and sirens between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. To date, there has been no public engagement notifying the public that 4410 Woodland Drive has been selected as a site for the new fire station. Normally, land developments are not conducted in public, and until council is at a point to move forward with public awareness, and that is the step that we're currently at right now. I just want to ensure council and the public that there are a number of opportunities throughout this process where public engagement will occur. Amending the North Area Structure Plan will require 3 readings by council, and the first reading must be 1 month prior to the second and third reading, with a public hearing scheduled in between before the second reading. There will be general advertisements on the city's website and in the newspaper for proposed amendments, and the hearing will describe why the amendment is required. During the subdivision process, to subdivide the lot for the fire station, letters will be circulated to all landowners within a 60-meter radius of the proposed lot, and this will include site drawings. The subdivision will also be provided to include school boards, the province, utility services providers for their input, and the public can provide concerns or comments to be considered before drafting a decision. The subdivision authority will issue a decision, and once that is completed, there is still a 14-day period in which public can appeal the decision. And if no appeals are made, then a plan can be submitted to Alberta Titles for endorsement and registration of the subdivision of the new properties. For the development permit process, a fire station is classified as an emergency service provision publicly provided under the land use bylaw and is a discretionary use in the CS or community services district zoning. Being that it is discretionary use, all landowners within 60 meters will be notified by mail of a development permit application and will be invited to provide comments. Discretionary permits meeting all parcel development regulations and which receive no opposition may be approved by the development officer. However, permits receiving an opposition in which there are variances or deemed complex of the particular public interest will be considered by MPC. Following the decision there still is a 21-day appeal period prior to issuance of a development permit. Lastly, and once we're much further along in the development, it is anticipated that we will hold an open house when we have building designs to share and drawings to share with the public to provide some sort of discussion about the project. At this time, administration is recommending to council that they support removing the habendum clause from the portion of 4410 Woodland Drive to accommodate a future fire station, and that council directs administration to commence all other steps required to apply for subdivision and to prepare the site for future development, and that council selects members to participate on the functional element design committee. And if there are any questions, I am happy to take them at this time.
Thank you, Director Piche. Councilor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So absolutely no intention of delaying this any further. I'm just asking this question. Has there been any further discussions with AHS to be part of this project, as there has been interest, what I've heard in the past, of AHS having a new EMS facility? Because it would be long-term financially, because apparently they leased the building back with a plan of payback to the municipality after 10 years, if that's true.
CEO Gowdy?
We haven't gotten anywhere near details like that, so I'm not familiar with the payback period, but certainly we are talking with AHS and they're interested in being in the building. So.
Councilor Hoekstra?
Thanks you, Mayor Creasy. So public engagement, we did do it at Coffee with Council. Did we not? Like you said, there has been no public engagement. So a tiny bit, right? Because it did get introduced. So just that was quite a report. How long do you think that's going to potentially take? When you start saying there's 21 days to do this, and do you anticipate any of those steps potentially failing? If that's the correct word to use, fail.
We hope not, but we have to plan for anything, and we have to follow legislation. So as we move through each section of the planning and development stage, and of course our expert planning and development crew will be doing that. As we move forward, they will make sure that we advertise correctly, hold the proper hearings, follow everything within the legislation that is required, and it does allow much of the public to be able to have their feedback and input. We're not actually even planning any type of, if everything goes as planned, we're not planning any type of construction or any start of anything until at least late next fall. Or next fall.
Councilor Dallas?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Thank you for that. There was a lot of information and a lot of timelines in there, and it sounds daunting, but I appreciate that you all are willing to take on the effort. My only one question, and maybe I guess it's a question, is if we can evaluate while we're doing this the parking beside the facility to ensure that it is still accessible. As it currently stands, a large number of the current facility users are parking on private property. And I just want to make sure that we are still making the one lot accessible and that they won't be impeding, entrance and exit of the new facility that could be in that area, and ensure that there is suitable space. Thank you.
CEO Gowdy?
Currently, we haven't planned any improvements to the existing public parking. But certainly we'll be ensuring that what's there is maintained. And if there's an opportunity to improve it, we would look at that as well.
I would just like some clarity on which public parking area were you referring to?
So there is a parking lot immediately to the east of the southernmost diamond that's on a city municipal reserve.
Correct. And if the diamond's not going to be there, we're still feeling necessary to have parking for the other ones then?
Yes.
That are further away. Okay. Just was a little unclear there was to the logic. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Koenig.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. And to be honest with you, I'm the exact opposite. I would like to see us in the subdivision process, use that space, take that space for the fire hall, because ultimately those, yes, I understand the parking requirements there, but long-term, again, those two remaining ball diamonds will one day be gone. So to give us more space for the fire hall, I would argue that parking should be amalgamated into that new lot myself. Because as it is, even when you utilize those two other lots, or the two other ball diamonds, you're right, Councillor Dallas, they park in the co-op parking lot right now. But I would, again, I would like to see us, I know we're a little ways away, but I would like to consider the idea of amalgamating that parking into that future subdivision as well. Thank you.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would like to go ahead and make that motion. The council supports moving the addendum, is that pronounced correctly? Sorry, clause from a portion of 4410 Woodland Drive, Plan 1025661, Block 1, Block 9, to accommodate a future fire station.
Anything additional? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. You can see it's highlighted. I don't know what else I can do. So I'm going to tap onto it. And that is endorsed unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
I'd like to move that thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd like to move that council directs administration to commence all other required steps to apply for subdivision and preparation of the site for future development. Do you need further clarity what site in that motion? As I just read it word for word.
It's already been mentioned earlier, so I don't think it would hurt to put it in there, to be honest with you.
Okay, the site at 4410 Woodland Drive.
No other comments? Please proceed to vote. So on our voting machines, it does not include the civic address. However, we all know in this room that it does include the address as outlined as 4410 Woodland Drive. Very good, and the notes will reflect that as well. Otherwise, it's just an unnecessary time delay. So please go ahead and vote. And that is supported unanimously as well. Or is there not? Exactly. Yes, thank you. Anyone willing to put forward a motion? Or do we want to have some discussion on the functional element design committee? Or would you prefer to have some time to think about it, discuss at a later period of time, whichever you prefer? Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I think that would be more appropriate. That that committee isn't going to be struck for a long time. Is that not right? We would probably be looking for, months from now, I would think, before it would be needed. Or are you looking for something like on the lot they were talking about tonight, which would be part of that committee's process to look at the lot and see what size is needed and so on for the fire hall, correct?
Jim Gowdy?
Chair, through to Councillor Gullikson. Yes, I would say it's likely a couple of months, but we are planning to start the RFP to select our architect shortly. And so I could see us before the end of the year starting to meet. This committee would look at adjacent land uses, and if there's recommendations about parking, that would return to council potentially.
So so what's the process tonight then? How would we work that process? Just put our hand up and say we're interested and then let the mayor make a decision?
That would be one way, but we would be also happy to bring it back to a future meeting to give people time to.
Because I haven't paid
discuss
him
that.
anything to be on that committee, so I don't know if I'd be able to, but anyway. Yeah, so. Yeah, anyway, I don't think we should do it tonight, is my opinion.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I was curious as to what qualities of a member would you like that? Like, I have time, but I don't necessarily understand the functions of all the elements as it says functional. So, but yet I learn, I can learn. And I gathered you said something about tours. And I think that's very, very enlightening when you see other people's buildings too. So I wouldn't mind hearing who you're looking or what qualities you're looking for in these counselors.
That's a very interesting question, Councillor Hoekstra, and I'll let our CAO have his input on that item.
So certainly availability, just pragmatically, that is something that's important for us. We had a pretty successful process with the doing a similar process for the police station this way, and
Public Works too.
Yeah, Public Works as well, though that was kind of after the fact. We wanted to get ahead of it rather than after the fact. And so availability, an open mind, critical thinking, open to input, not really like a good understanding of fire building requirements. That will come from our own, well, the architect, our own internal staff, and tours of other similar facilities in other communities.
So, as I said, a very fair question. I think just by the mere fact of the discussion that we've had leading on this subject up for several years now, I don't feel that any council is not qualified to be on that committee. I think it's more an availability and your own interest if you want to be involved in that type of a process on it. Simply put, I have interest in time. Yep. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I was just going to reiterate what said CEO Gowdy had suggested that we had a committee for the police station, and I know Public Works building. Yeah, I know the mayor and I sat on a committee afterwards. Yeah, the mayor, of course, has a little more skill set than the rest of it in terms of drawings and so forth. But I would suggest that the mayor circulate an email tomorrow and ask who would want to work on that. Is there a number you're looking for? 2, 3, 6, 7 councilors? two max. I would suggest the mayor circulate an email and just see who's interested and go from there.
Any number higher than 2 would make our administration shudder. So I think that 2 will be sufficient. But yeah, let's give everyone some time. We are short one member right now. I think that would be fair. And I, in fact, had planned on asking the question, and we'll give a date for you to put in your desire to be involved and perhaps a condensed version of the reasons why. And I will make the appointment from there, if that's agreeable to council. Very good. Thank you, Director Piche. Councillor Hoekstra, you have a notice of motion that was provided in writing, and I would have you read that into the record, please.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. My motion is to direct administration to bring for council's consideration an amendment to the traffic bylaw, allowing construction or work trailers to be on the road unattached at a work site between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m.
And just for clarification only, the road means any roadway within the city of Lacombe,
Correct.
as opposed to a specific location.
Correct.
Okay, very good. All right, and I believe that concludes our regular business today. However, we do have an in-camera legal item. So if we could have a motion, please. Councillor Hoekstra.
I'd like to move that we move in camera.
The record will show that it's 8:12. And please vote now. That was unanimously in favor. We'll wait for IT to let us know when